Actually, Paul really helped me out through this. The first case that you probably remember, we did an MIS disc and then an MIS Lamy. And then I think for a couple of weeks, I'd book like 3 MIS TLIFs in a row and have Paul around while I just did them and develop my comfort level by doing that. And like Vic pointed out, once you get the fundamentals of it, I think it helps to have an open background so you know what you're looking at through a tube. You have reference to where you're looking at. And then just looking at minor advancements like single position, prone. But once you have your bearings on an MIS procedure, it becomes relatively straightforward.
So the question was, what was your first MIS procedure and how did it?
Well, I first of all, I start doing MIS with most of us with kyphoplasty, at least my generation. That's a very good procedure. We know that. A patient comes with severe pain, and then you do a 15-minute, 20-minute procedure. They get off the table, and the pain is gone. And that requires us truly, for me, for the first time, to look at the pictures and then adjust my hands. My hands and eyes are not in the same direction. And then when I got really good at that, then I felt a lot more, comfortable doing posterolateral fusion. And I started doing lots of posterolateral percutaneous screws 12, 13 years ago. But then I noticed insurance don't pay for that. At that time, it was really ridiculous. Patient comes with a bad fracture. All you need to stabilize, and I can do 3 level above, 3 level below because I was good at that. But the hospital didn't like it because they couldn't bill for it. But then I was looking for other alternatives that we can get more exposure. I did lots of ALIF, and I did my ALIF with an access surgeon who was fantastic access surgeon in a rural hospital. Within 20 minutes, half an hour, I had my access. And ALIF is the access surgeon surgery. Yeah, we are spine surgeon are there as well, but it's make and break of the ALIF is the access surgeon. Then I went to a new hospital, and I wish I was kidding, but it took that surgeon 3.5 hours for 1 level access. And I knew I have to look for alternatives that wouldn't be sustainable. And that is how I got into MIS, because I was looking for, this approach I just showed you, the single surgeon approach, there's not even enough space for an assistant. But you don't need that because the surgery become very efficient. And once you replicate, it's very algorithmic. Once you master it for 1 level, you just have to readjust your x-rays for the next level and then replicate it and then move on. And then it's just a matter of consistency. And we have actually made a science out of it. Where it took me 180 cases to fall below 1 hour for 1 level. Everybody who we do it together, they add to my experience. They don't need to build their own experience. They fall below 1 hour after 15 cases. So that is truly what I'm proud of, that I can give the knowledge to other people to speed up their learning process.
Thank you. Quickly, with Roger Hartle, we kind of learned, we really innovated MIS, and it was, I think the common theme is, the outpatient outcomes. For me, it's like that when I do an MIS as an endoscopic lamia, typically it's a family friend, and I invite them for dinner the next day. And I would not dare to do this with an open laminectomy. So that's, kind of my take-home message there. Paul, also your first case, but then also I want to know, where are the challenges that you see right now, and where are the areas that you push MIS, and where's the areas that you kind of withdraw?
Good question. So my residency, we didn't do much in the way of MIS, but I did a fellowship with Kevin Foley. So one of the, I was going to say, but with Kevin Foley, and obviously one of the founders for minimally invasive surgery, and currently my partner, and very thoughtful guy. And he was thinking about minimally invasive surgery even in the 90s. And he originally, I think, promoted the first percutaneous screw fixation set in early 2000s. And that really, I think, set the trend for modern day minimally invasive surgery. And so when I graduated, my first case was an MIS TLIF, I think, if I recall.
Cool. And so what are you pushing? Where do you go back?
Well,
in your practice, where do you think that, because right. How has it evolved?
Right. So very good question. And I was going to say it's evolved in multiple other conditions, like we talked about spinal oncology, but deformity as well. So if you ask me, like MIS deformity has been not a new concept anymore. It's been actually promoted for the last decade probably now. And early on, we had a lot of optimism that it would be applicable to all deformity situations, but that's absolutely not true. And I think this is where I think you move forward, because we're pushing the envelope with, like, say, T10 to S1 initially, and then T10 to ileum percutaneous instrumentation. And I think a lot of MI surgeons now will tell you, not all, because there's Neil Nod, who's not here, but you would say it's still a viable object. But for most MIS surgeons, a T10 ileum is probably not ideal. And so I think what we've realized that certain deformities are just not as applicable. I don't think you're getting as good outcomes. And the long segment percutaneous fixation can be a real challenge.
And where are you growing your practice? What are you going to innovate next year? What are you going to show us?
One of my no secret. I'm constantly learning. So Bill Taylor, he's setting up right now. He's going to give his long experience at PTP. But that's what I was alluding to earlier. We started with like a posterior tubular-based sort of minimally invasive approach. And don't get me wrong, endoscopy has been around for a long time. But in this country, it really hasn't been that popular. So we started with tubular-based approaches. Now we're progressing to endoscopy. But that's what I mean. There's a progression and expansion of minimally invasive techniques, even the TLIF, right? So you showed basically an SAP resection technique, whereas a lot of other folks will take the IEP off and part of the SAP, and they call that a TLIF. So there's just a wide spectrum. Everybody has their own take on it. And prone transpsoas is just another innovation that was because of a problem. People didn't like the position switch. Right. So when a problem develops, surgeons, a lot of smart surgeons, sort of develop a workaround from it. And so I'm always constantly learning. So prone transpsoas, I wouldn't have thought of like 7 years ago. Yeah. Now it's something that I think has its place. It's growing, and obviously, like any other technique, it's going to have to find its own indication. It's going to be good for some things, not so good for others. And so we're in that learning phase. So what's the next step? We talked about that a little, and some of it may be an enabling technology. We talked about navigation robotics. We actually haven't talked anything about AR or AI, and those are like hype words, buzz terms. And I don't know if that's going to materially impact things in the near future. In the long-term future, I think it will. So that's where I think things are going. What's your take on it?
No, just before we go back to the round, I mean, I think AI is I like, when you talked about the robot, and I was just like doing the, it's amazing. Really, robot, what else you said? My navigation has been between my ears. It's perfect. I really like that when you said that. Now, I think AI in the OR, I think it's more going to be a controlling sort of thing, like efficiency tool where, camera watches you and is like, hey, you have been doing 5 totally inefficient moves here right now. Let's go back to doctor school. I think where AI and technology comes in is, I think, patient care. I mean, that's what we see right now. My clinic is, all these MIS patients, they all, we use, app technology to follow them. And that has totally changed my clinic. Where it's these patients, I can track them every day. I know what's going on with them, but they're not like coming in waiting for 3 hours so they can finally show up. And I think that's a big thing. And then the patient care. So look at your clinic and your hospital. All these guys that answer phones and like sit there and really don't know a whole lot what you are doing. I think AI already now is going to provide better answers. And so I think that's where a lot of this stuff will come in. The technology in there is, I don't know. I think that's my guess.
If I may say something about AI. I did a dissertation in Heidelberg in computer science, so I'm very familiar with that. We have an AI department. Right now, it will come, but it will come in a ways that we cannot imagine how it's going to impact us.
You're scared.
No, we are scary in a way. Right now, my AI department, we have a program. I just go sit with the patient. I just have a conversation. 3 minutes after I'm done, my medical record is done by AI. We have a prototype. We are going to implement it within 1 month. And prior authorization, like how many times do they bounce it back on us and so on. AI will come, but it's not going to replace surgeons. It's going to impact many of the processes that right now are very painful. So I'm scared, but I'm hopeful.
So for the panel, and we have a wide range of ages from Anu to, actually, Hamid. Rock said he was oldest, but he's not. Actually, not anymore, actually. So, I'd be interested to know what your takes on what would be the more popular MIS procedures in the future. What do you think in the next 5 years?
You're biased. To the last point about where it's going to go. To your point about where it's going to go, I think that as we got more into MIS stuff, especially in my practice, the use of fluoroscopy and radiation has gone up. And so I think as we go forward, I think, learning to get away maybe from this, using more robotics and more navigation to get away from the high dose fluoroscopy is probably where we're going to go, just because it is directly correlated to MIS surgery.
One question I think, the presentation was effective. The question for the SI joint also is, what are the technologies that help us to preserve, other technologies to, have the little motion that is there preserved? Is there any benefit to that? And what do you think about, the denervation procedures that people do, whether do, neurectomies from S1 to S3 down the sacrum, that they do also for SI joint issues? What is your take on that?
I think we're learning about that. We know that just simply fusing the SI joint does indeed influence the motion above. Not much, but it does. It's been shown that in the lab. So I don't know where we're going to go with that. I think that's more of a lab significance than it is clinically significant in terms of how much motion it does up there. But that's kind of an active area that we're looking at. Not sure yet.
Yeah. So there won't be an arthroplasty soon.
Not yet.
Not working on anything yet.
I don't think so. I think based on that, I think we talked about that, but that one slide I showed, which showed the native anatomy of the SI joint, like less than a degree, like half a degree in rotation and 0.1 millimeters displacement. I mean, it just is not supposed to move. And I think the pathology is likely hypermobility of that stress of that tongue and groove.
It's like maybe like rear wheel steering on your car.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thank you.
I think for my generation that's just coming out of training, I think we're seeing a lot more of that financial pressure from the clinical entities of reducing length of stay, reducing your operative costs. So I think there's a lot of pressure on us, like how can we minimize our trauma that we're causing during our surgeries. So I definitely have a bias given our training, but definitely all the incoming fellows are very, very interested in endoscopic spine surgery and seeing if we can do same-day surgery, send them out, and trying to find that balance between expensive disposables versus shorter length of stay.
So you think the future is outpatient spine surgery, which you hear about a lot now. Cost savings, hopefully faster recovery. So.
But the other thing is, I don't know if you guys read it in the New York Times, there was an article about peripheral vascular disease, and they were bashing these surgeons, just like throwing them on the bus, and then, no matter what we do. So they're going to push it out into ASCs, then we're going to show how inefficient the systems are that we are right now, and then afterwards they're going to throw us on the bus. Maybe we do need AI for that already.
All right. So again, remind me of the question. The challenge. What's the popular procedures, or
what do you think is going to be the most popular procedure in upcoming years?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because we had this discussion at dinner where it seems like the adoption of things like lateral techniques is relatively it's plateaued. So I don't know if prone laterals or PTP is the solution to get more posterior surgeons to adopt that technique. So that's one thing. I mean, image guidance, robotics, these are all kind of similar things where basically you're getting more real-time information about anatomy in a three-dimensional space that's accessible to you. And so, one of the hallmarks of minimally invasive initially was that you can't really see the anatomy, and you had to use fluoroscopy, which adds its own risks with radiation exposure and things like that. And so, I think at the crux of it, when you're doing minimally invasive versus open, is just replacing that deficit of, visual knowledge of where the anatomy is, relative to where you're working. And so I think whatever solution is helpful for that might increase adoption. But again, and speaking to some of the other points, cost is a big issue. I mean, how many health systems are doing well financially right now? Probably a minority of them. And so, spine surgery is expensive. I think it's important because, when it's done well and in the right indications, the patients do well. But, I think that's going to be something that we have to be conscious of, as we evolve our techniques.
But spine surgery is profitable for the hospital. It's probably one of the more high margin procedures. So, a lot of hospitals aren't doing well, but it's not from spine. So, there's still a margin no matter what we do, honestly. So, but great. Rock?
Yeah, so I think there's still a lot of room to grow. We're probably at our infancy. When you think about MIS applications in spine, one of the critical things is navigation, right? And navigation is great. It's changed the way I practice, but it gives you a static image. It's not real time, right? And that limits you. So, for example, in the cervical spine, we don't navigate because there's so much motion in the cervical spine. Your navigation is not going to be accurate. But it'd be great if we can find a way through software to have real time navigation that can accommodate and take into account changes in anatomy. And I think that's going to come. It's a software issue, not a hardware issue. And the other thing is robotics. Robotics being integrated into MIS surgeries more than they are right now, I think is going to be a big shift as well in the upcoming decades. If you look at how we use robotics and MIS procedures right now, it's to put in a screw and to hold a retractor. I mean, I'm really fast at putting in screws, and I could hold a retractor through a table-mounted thing. So it's not really that much of a value add. But if you think about what robotics is intended to do, like with the Da Vinci, it allows you to gain access and visualization into small spaces that your hands can't reach, right? That's what Da Vinci does. So once we transition over from basically a retractor holder to something that has more capabilities with the end effector, I think that's going to change the way we do MIS surgery.
Actually, one quick thing to that, about the robot. Again, we don't have a robot, and it's been very frustrating. But we've been working a lot on developing everybody else. And one thing that I never realized about the robot is, never kind of conceptually, it took me years to understand it. What it allows you to do is to have a serial application of parts into a location that you can't do otherwise. And so that's really important for these additive cages, and it can't be done otherwise because otherwise we freehand stuff. And so I never understood that, but I think that's already now something that really is a great value for a robot that you can't do otherwise.
So in my opinion, obviously sacroiliac joint is a big deal. We surgeons are already late. Interventionalists are picking up at a light speed. Interventional side joint, this is statistic. Yeah. Somebody comes with back pain to you, 24% it's a sacroiliac joint, not the spine. Somebody had a previous fusion comes to you, 43% is if they still have back pain, it is sacroiliac joint. And these are the previous fusion comes to you, 42% is if they still have back pain, practice. Otherwise, other people are going to pick it up and then we will complain about it. This is one.
That's a great point, and I just reviewed maybe I shouldn't say that, but a paper about trends in SI fusion surgery, and it's exponential growth.
Yeah.
But so this particular paper divided between non-surgeons and surgeons doing it, and the exponential growth has been on a non-surgeon side.
Yes. So that's what I mean. We have to adopt it to keep it within the surgical field. So before we go and complain about them doing that, let's just bring it in now. Second is segmental correction in elderly. Lots of elderlies, for lots of our colleagues, either you do T5 to say iliac crest or you don't do anything at all. Whereas there are lots of people, like especially elderly, that they are just not candidate for T5 to iliac crest fusion. The segmental correction that can give them, maybe it doesn't fix all the problem, but it gives them few years of independency. And bringing these two to a surgery center in the next few years, that should be our goal, because we know in a surgery center, we are more efficient. We don't have to work against lots of gears that sometimes they work against us. And we know the outcomes is just better.
No, Well, thank you very much. I think we're ready for our final lab with Bill Taylor. He's going to show us his PTP technique. But I want to thank the panel.